John was lying on his stomach, almost afraid to peer over the large mound of dirt he was hiding behind. Once he gathered enough courage, he pulled out his binoculars and he could clearly see over to their den. They held their noses in the air, and he knew that they were trying to sniff him out. Their massive size made them easy to see, but he still couldn't believe what he was seeing. How was this real? How did they get here? Where did they come from? It was almost as if he were looking at a science experiment gone horribly wrong. An average wolf filled with demons, and somehow they escaped from the lab. A genetic mistake, and here he was looking at them. He knew that there wasn't a lab that could create something like this, however. These creatures were straight from the depths of hell. They were standing there on their back legs, walking as if they were human. The fur was long on some, but short on the others. Their chests were broad, and they had long torsos. And they had hands instead of paws, except for their feet. He noted that their feet were like those of actual dogs. They didn't all look the same, though. Some reminded him of hyenas, and some were just like werewolves he had seen in the movies as a kid. Large, protruding snouts with jaws that opened, displaying razor-sharp fangs that would strike fear into anyone. This creature he was looking at was pure evil. He thought back to all the encounters he had listened to, and he was completely understanding as to why people would never go back into the woods after seeing these things. He wondered to himself if he would after this. After all, he and Marie had animals to harvest for their food. He didn't need to hunt at all. Marie. His thoughts went to his dear sweet wife at that very moment. I must survive this for Marie. She is my whole world, and me losing this battle against these hell beasts is not an option. He turned from his position to look down below him. He hadn't heard anything creeping up on him, but with these things, anything is possible. Why couldn't it have been a Bigfoot? Why did it have to be Dogman inhabiting these woods? He turned the volume down on his walkie so anything coming through didn't alert them as to where he was. Although, he knew he already did. They were just messing with him. John, come in, buddy. Please tell me where you're at again, Mark said over the walkie. I need to know exactly where you are so I can come help you. John fumbled with his walkie. Even the slightest sound at the moment was too loud. I'm right at the ridgeline near the water. I hunkered down behind a large mound of dirt. I can see them, Mark. The sun is starting to set, and I need to get the hell out of here, John whispered into his walkie. They know I'm here. There's no way that they can't. I'm headed your way now, bud. Don't move unless it's an emergency. We can't risk you getting turned around and then getting lost in these woods. That would be a fatal mistake, John replied. I looked at Connie and Marie. They were both like fragile children standing in the kitchen, both on the verge of tears. I'm taking this walkie with me, so I'm going to need both of you to trust me. I must be able to communicate with John, but that means I won't be able to communicate with either of you. I'm going out there to get John before it gets any darker. Once complete night falls, he and I are both going to be sitting ducks. The good news is that he didn't have to go in too far before he found them. Connie walked over to me and hugged me, sobbing. I love you, Mark, with every fiber of my being. Please come back to us safely with John. I pulled away and smiled at her. I'll do my level best, you know that. Marie stood up, not saying a word. She didn't have to. At this point, it was a make-or-break situation. I knew that I had to get to John, as well as myself, back in one piece. I ran to my truck and sped as fast as I could. I saw John's truck and I parked off to the side, away behind him, and I ran the rest of the way in. John, come in. I just made it to the woods, I said. Are you still at the ridgeline? They're making their way into the woods now, Mark. They're all disappearing in different directions. The sun was setting further below the horizon, and I knew that I had to get to him quick. I started to make my way up to the water where he was at. I could hear far-off noises, and I knew based on what he had just told me, it had to be the echoes of these dogmen walking. I saw John in the distance, and I mustered all the strength that I had left in my legs to run up to him. Come on, we've got to get out of here, I said breathlessly as I grabbed his shoulders to pull him to his feet. I hear them walking, and they're bound to get closer to us. As John stood up, his pack got caught on a large branch. As he turned around to remove it from the limb, the head of a dogman came up over the mound of dirt. He and I were face to face with one of these hell beasts. Its head was large and its ears were pointed. Dark, sinister red eyes bore holes into our souls. Saliva dripped from its fangs and blood covered the dark black fur around its face, and we could only assume that they'd had a recent kill. We were both frozen in fear. What the hell do we do now? If we turned our backs on it, we were done. If we stay here, we face the same fate. John was staggered just enough from me that I felt comfortable pulling my weapon. I slowly pulled my shotgun as this thing snarled and growled at every move I made. My mouth was dry and my heart was in my throat. I didn't know if me shooting it was a good idea, but at this point, it was our only hope. At the very least, I would injure the damn thing. I said a prayer under my breath and quickly raised my weapon the rest of the way and fired. My shot was a direct hit, right in the face of this Dogman. It instantly fell backwards and we could no longer see it. Not knowing if a shotgun blast to the face would actually kill one of these creatures, we immediately took off running as fast as we could down the mountain to our trucks. Even though our ears were ringing from the shotgun blast, we heard them all clamoring behind us. The echo from the gun hadn't scared them off as I'd hoped. It was almost as if it had called them in, and they were closing in fast. We raced to the water, sliding across the slick rocks as we crossed, and we both fell in with a splash. We quickly got to our feet and made our way closer and closer to the exit of the woods. John flew into his truck, and I got into mine. We started them at the same time, and as we turned on our bright lights, we saw them. Their eyes shined brighter than the moon, and their large, ghastly figures outlined the trees. But they didn't come after us. For whatever reason, they stopped. It was almost as if something were keeping them in the woods. We certainly didn't stick around to find out. We raced backwards all the way back to the house. That way we could keep an eye on them just in case they came after us again. John and I slammed our trucks into park and quickly made it inside. Connie and Marie both gasped when we came in. I'm sure we looked rough based on our ordeal. I'm just glad we made it back at all. They helped us take off our wet clothes that were covered in more than just water, if I'm being honest. We both had blood on our faces from that shot that the Dogman took. The only thing that we knew to do then was to pace the floor. We were too filled with adrenaline to sit down, calm down, or do anything else. We recounted everything to Connie and Marie as best we could. But we knew it was all coming out too quickly for them to truly understand. We looked death right in the face tonight, John said, shaking. I don't know if I'll ever go back in the woods again knowing these things are out there. Hell, after that, we may even move. I know I've seen these things in the woods before, but I've never seen more than one, and never that close. I feel bad for not leaving beforehand knowing what I know now. Marie gasped. Maybe moving should be a decision that's made when cooler heads prevail, John. He took a deep, ragged breath. When cooler heads prevail, Marie? John asked harshly. I was face to face with one of these damn monsters. Its breath was a stench you can't describe. Its eyes were red, and the teeth. John couldn't go any further. He broke down then. Marie sat down and held him as he cried. I knew in that moment this was something that was going to take John a while to get over, and he was right. After seeing them that close in the woods, maybe we should all move. It really was something of nightmares that we were face to face with, guys. You really don't understand. You two have seen it from a distance. We were inches from this thing. There were at least 5 of them in the woods, 6 counting the one that I shot. But something strange happened when we were leaving. Something I found very peculiar. We turned on our lights and we started backing up, and they didn't come running after us as we'd expected. It was almost as if they couldn't break some imaginary barrier. John pulled himself together and apologized for breaking down. I knew it was hard for him, but I understand. There's no need to apologize, John, Connie said. But when you two are up to it, we really need to all collectively sit down so you can calmly tell us what it is that you saw. Then we can regroup and try to figure out what we do from here. Obviously, none of us want to move, so we have to figure out how to handle this bunch, and if you shooting that one did any good, and where we go from there. John stood up from the couch and started pacing again. I need to go home. I want to go home. I would love to take a shower and get all this blood off of me. I stood up and walked over to him and placed my hands on his shoulders. We'll get through this, bud. I know it's tough right now, but you're not alone. I was there too, and we'll get through this together. How about me and Connie follow you guys home to make sure that you both get there and inside safely? He looked me in the eyes. That would be nice. I'm hungry and scared right now. I just need to be in my own element. Don't take offense to me wanting to leave. Home is just where I feel the safest. Connie walked over to where we stood. It's also farther from the woods than we are now. So, do you guys know if you were able to kill that thing or not? I mean, I shot it in the face. We're covered in the remnants of it. But who knows if I were able to kill it or not? We surely didn't stick around to find out. I know hindsight is always 20/20, but when you're in that position, you wouldn't have stayed either. We hauled freight after I shot it and wasn't about to turn around to see if it were dead or not, I said. Blood, John said, out of the blue, recounting things going through his mind. Its face had blood on it. I could only assume at the time that the blood was from a recent kill. But what is the likelihood that that's the one that came through the cornfield, Mark? I thought about it for a while. I had poured all that pig's blood in the corn, about 2 gallons of it. If it were the same beast that ravaged the cornfield, that would explain the blood on its fur. The thought of that made recalling the encounter even scarier, however. If that's true, I exclaimed, that would mean that it was the one chasing me through the tall stalks of corn. I was relieved that I hadn't stopped to look for that walkie-talkie then. If I would have met that creature in the corn, and I'm sure that I wouldn't be here now. We only saw the head and a portion of the neck out in the woods, but in an instant, that Dogman could have been on us. If its head were that large, its body would have to be massive. The corn, Marie said, with wide eyes and fear coursing through her veins. There's still all that blood in the cornfield. What if they come back to it knowing it's there? We'll make sure that you get in safely, Marie, Connie said. More than likely, if this were the same Dogman that was in the corn, I don't think the others are going to venture out this far. We've only seen that one that matches the description of the one that Mark shot. And honestly, who is to say that it was the only Dogman to come out? We don't know anything about them, so it's hard to say. Yes, I saw the other ones through my binoculars, and they didn't appear to have anything on them. Not like this one did. Come to think of it, I never saw it, the one Mark shot. My thought is, now that I think about it further, is that one had to be in the corn because it wasn't there at the den with the rest of them when I looked. Therefore, it would make sense as to why it wasn't there, John interjected. It's a miracle we made it back, I said. It could have gotten you or me at any given time. Marie tried to shake that thought from her mind. We just need to get home. It's already dark, which limits our sight, but these things I know can see even better at night. I grabbed my shotgun and watched John and Marie as they got into their truck, and Connie and I got into ours to follow them to their home. Connie kept an eye out on the sides for any movement. I was hoping one didn't decide to jump in front of my truck again. We made it to John and Marie's without incident. We both got out and made sure that they got inside safely. Please let me know when you're home, they both said. There's no one to protect you guys. I smiled at her and John. I knew that we would be okay. Having faced what could have been the leader of the pack, then shooting it, left me feeling more confident about these things along with trying to figure out what these dogmen were. I still didn't know exactly what they were, but if they can be injured, they can be killed. We sat at the table the next morning over breakfast and coffee talking about the previous night's events. I was just thankful to still be here and to be able to sit here with my wife. It could have ended horribly. We stood the possibility of being injured, or worse yet, killed by one of these dogmen. That's what I struggled with the most. Not that I wanted to be maimed or killed, but why didn't this thing attack us when it could have? At some point, I also knew that we would have to go back into those woods. I didn't want to put Connie at risk, but I also didn't think John would be up for a trek in the woods anytime soon, or ever again. But to get to the bottom of this whole thing, someone would have to. I was anxious to see if that dogman was lying dead over there near that large mound of dirt. It should be, given that I shot it in the face. But I knew getting Connie on board with this wouldn't be easy. We waited until mid-afternoon to go out and make sure that all of our livestock had what they needed. We decided to get them on a different schedule and start giving them more food at night. We didn't want to be out in the early morning hours, just in case. I decided now was a better time than any to drop my plan onto Connie. You're joking, right, Mark? Good one. That's not happening, she said as she tossed grains and corn to the chickens. Connie, do we ever leave a dead or injured animal in the woods that we've shot? I was hoping that if I used the hunting analogy, she wouldn't be able to dispute it. Well, no, of course not, Mark, she said as she turned to face me. Okay, so how is this any different? I said, trying hard to get her to go along with it. It's some kind of an animal, and we need to go to see if it can be killed. If it can, we're home free. That means they all can. Connie thought it over. Well, this is different. This dogman is not your typical animal that we hunt in the woods. If it isn't dead, it will be looking for revenge and extremely pissed off because you tried to blow its face off. She wasn't wrong, but at the same time, we had to know if we would be able to move any further or plan anything at all. Well, I guess I'll go out there on my own then, I said as I walked away. I heard the shovel that she was holding in her hand hit the ground hard, and I turned around. Fine, Mark, she said angrily. I'll go out in the woods with you, but on one condition. We have to let Marie and John know that we're going, because if something happens to us out there, someone has to know where we went. I knew that what we were planning wouldn't be something that either of them would go for. Walking into their living room the next day, I was nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "You're not serious, you guys," Marie said. John just hung his head. "Mark, Connie, please, don't go back into those woods." I knew what they were thinking, and if I were in their shoes, I would have been thinking the same things. I would have probably been a little harsher, but that wasn't their nature. We explained to them why, and they understood, but they still didn't like the idea. "Well, how are we going to know that something has happened to you? We can't just let you run off into the woods without any way to communicate," Marie said anxiously. "I have 3 walkie-talkies," I told them. "The 4th is in your cornfield." "That's right," John said. "I forgot about that." Just then, I had a thought. "Let's see what the condition of your corn is. Maybe we'll find the walkie on the way. I know I dropped it right at the edge of the corn, so it's not like we have to go into the thick part." John chuckled. "Did you hit your head on a rock the other night when you fell in the water? Do you really want me to go into the cornfield that's covered in pig blood to look for a walkie?" I'll admit, not the smartest, but at the same time, I was curious. I wondered if the beast came out this way after me or had went another way. We all know that they're here, there's no question about that. But we have to know what makes them tick, if they can be injured, if they can be killed. And why didn't they come after us the other night? I said, pleading my case. Connie was just looking at me, and I could see that her wheels were spinning. I was hoping she would say something. She stood up and then walked over to the screened front door. Silence. She finally turned to face us. I know he sounds like he's lost his mind, and I too thought the same thing when he told me what he wanted to do. But the fact of the matter is, he's right. It's just us out here. No one would ever believe in a million years what has happened to us. We only have each other. If we don't go out there to see if this dogman that he shot the other night is dead, we'll never know how to truly defeat them, or if they can be defeated. Then all of us will either have to live in fear or pick up and move. I don't see that we have any other choice here, Connie said adamantly. Thank God she's on my side. I can't do this alone. Something of this magnitude must be done together, either the 2 of us or the 4 of us. Connie walked outside with me to go look for the walkie. I remember the last time I was here. I was running for my life with this literal hellhound on my trail. I didn't think I would make it to my truck. I imagined it lunging at me from behind, pulling me to the ground, and tearing me to pieces. The worst part of that feeling is that no one would ever know until they came back. I shook the thought from my head, thankful that the worst-case scenario never played out. Then I heard Connie yell for me. She had walked a little way ahead of me, but not too far away that I couldn't see her. I ran over to where she was knelt down and I picked up what was left of my walkie. It was in pieces. She picked up the largest handheld part and the cover fell off, pulling the wires out with it. Smaller pieces of plastic littered the ground. This didn't appear to have any teeth marks on it, though, which meant it was stomped on. I tried to think back to when it fell. Did I fall on it or step on it? I couldn't have. This was on my side. If I had crushed it, it would have had to been in the front because I fell on my face. For me to have stepped on it, I would have had to backtrack, and I didn't. I also wasn't heavy enough to do this much damage. These walkies were sturdy. These weren't some cheap plastic walkie-talkies that break or quit within a few days. That means it didn't run this way. It was behind me, hunting me. This dogman is heavy without question, I said to Connie. It was chasing me and it followed me this way. My truck was right over there, almost where we're parked now. Man, that's not far at all. I'm glad that you're a fast runner, she said while looking over at me. Connie and I made our way back to the house and showed John and Marie what was left of the walkie. John took it from me and looked it over for a while, shaking his head. Well, John said, smiling, I guess we need to work out a new plan. Marie scoffed and shook her head. Connie and I looked over at each other confused, but eager to hear what she had to say. You can each take a walkie in case the 2 of you get separated, and then me and Marie will have the 3rd. I don't know what snapped in his brain from being totally against this to now being fully on board with us going back into the woods. I wasn't going to ask either in fear that he would change his mind. We sat down that evening and formulated how things would go, when we would enter the woods, and what all we would take in with us. The next evening, John and Marie showed up at our house. They were going to stay there, armed to the teeth, while Connie and I made our way into the woods. Geared up and ready to go, we came up with a code word to yell over the walkie just in case things went south for both Connie and I. We decided to go with the traffic light system. Code red meaning stop, code yellow meaning proceed with caution, or code green meaning it's safe to go or come in. We drove to the edge of the woods and sat there for a minute, taking in how ominous they now looked. I envisioned all the Dogman almost reaching for us but not coming out. That part still got to me. What was keeping them in the woods? We got out and cautiously looked all around us. We had each other's backs, and safety was number one. If Connie was facing forwards, I was looking behind us and vice versa. We made it to the water's edge. Not one single sound could be heard. The water sounded so loud against the silent backdrop of the forest. It was almost like everything there knew that there was a predator around. I was second-guessing this now. Maybe they were right. Maybe we shouldn't have come. But it's too late now. We're here, and we have no choice. This is our home. We moved ahead slowly, weapons drawn and ready. A little further up from the water sat the large mound of dirt. There was still dried blood all over the ground, and it was covered in small flies. I stood staring at the vast open space where the Dogman's head once filled. I remembered feeling its hot breath, its glowing red eyes, and its sharp fangs. The growl is something you'll never forget, though. Connie reached over and touched my arm. Are you doing okay with this, Mark? In reality, no, I wasn't at all. All I had to do was look over at the dirt mound to hopefully find the remains of something that shouldn't exist. I just couldn't make my body move from its place. Do you want me to go look? Connie asked, after noticing the fear in my eyes. I sighed. No, this is something I must do. I had the guts to shoot it. Now I have to have the guts to look and see if it's dead. Fear pricked every hair on my body to stand on end. I was afraid that if I looked over, another one would pop up again just as it had the other night. But this time I didn't think I would be so lucky. I finally got both my head and my legs in tune with one another and I walked forward. I got down on my knees, took a ragged breath, and peered over the side. I turned around and Connie inched closer to me with her shotgun ready to fire. It's gone. I was finally able to get the words out. Connie looked at me in amazement. I thought you said you shot it in the face. How is it gone? I was just as confused. He shouldn't have survived that. Nothing would survive that. The sun seemed to instantly go down at that point. Eerily, though, a band of frogs followed the darkness. Off in the distance, thunder rolled across the sky and a howl could be heard. It was almost like it was calling attention to the others that we were here. Connie looked at me. This is like some sort of horror movie, Mark. I don't know if this was such a good idea. I know, but we're here now. The Dogman is gone, and I don't know how. It's not going to have a face at all, I said. Let's go a little further and see what we find. I don't hear anything now, just thunder. We'll look for a little bit more and then leave before the rain comes. I could tell that she didn't agree with me, but she went along with it anyway. The thunder cracked loudly overhead and lightning began illuminating the woods. The further in we go, the worse this is getting. I think we should leave now, Connie said, beginning to turn around. I turned to follow her. I pulled out my flashlight, and that's when I saw it. A footprint. An actual human footprint. But this wasn't normal. Who has a print that big? Connie turned around when she heard me stop abruptly. Our eyes met, and she knew something was up. I held my finger to my mouth and told her to be quiet as I shone my flashlight on the print. Her eyes grew wide with fear. Bigfoot, I said in amazement. Bigfoot are also here.